mean, I have a ton of notes. They're just
Mm,
not
I'm sure you do.
for the podcast.
All
I
right.
mean, I have 38 text files. Wait, hold on. That's a lie. I have 85 text files. Because I
Wow.
forgot that I have a separate folder named old text files and a folder as text files.
Well, welcome to the first episode of the Kokotocast. I may have sniped you and started recording during that.
Oh, I see. It's unfortunate.
I figured if we're gonna yeah. So now you doxed out your text files. I hope you're fine with that.
Oh no.
You're gonna
Yeah,
get
it's fine.
hacked. um,
I mean, if people are that interested in my text files, they have another issue. So
dude, there's nothing I would kill to get a look at the MH United's text files.
all of the rambling
Dude,
nonsense
yeah,
that
here we
goes
can
on in
look at
my
my text
computer.
files. I have notes from my MH2 video. Uh,
Yeah.
every single symbol color in Monster Hunter 2 DOS written out as a hex value. The same
Oh,
thing
for the
again for some
Discord.
reason. Yeah, and then the notes for
Yeah.
this podcast. There you go. I don't know why I
That's
have
a
all those
that's a
open.
decent amount.
It's not that many, but I have more saved somewhere. But those are all the ones that I have open in the window right now.
Wait, you have them currently open.
Correct. Because when I'm on Windows 11, right? I don't know how if Notepad works like this in Windows 10, but in Windows 11, there's like different tabs in one window. Of each tab is its own text file, and there's 4 open right now.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it doesn't work that way on Windows 10.
yeah,
It works like a specific window that you pull up, kind of like the folders.
yeah. Anyways, um, so this is the Kokotocast. I'm here with Alphadivine, aka MH United. Um,
Howdy.
I figured I talked so damn much, I might as well record it. So, yeah, we're just here to kind of chill. It's pretty low effort, but I wanted to start just kind of talking about our experience with Monster Hunter. So, do you want me to go first, or should you go
Yeah,
first?
you can go first. You
Okay.
can. Yeah, good.
Okay. All right. I'm
It's
ever
your
so grateful.
podcast.
It is? Oh, dude, no
Yeah,
way.
true.
Um, but yeah, so I don't remember if I said this already, but I wanted to go over our experience with Monster Hunter, just kind of how we got into the series, which games we've played, and just our general experience with it. So I started playing Monster Hunter when I was, oh god, I don't even know how old I was. Probably like 11. But I started with Try on my Wii because I it was the only console that I actually had at the time. But I remember I was at a GameStop, and you know how they used to have those TVs in a GameStop that would just be playing like game reviews and things? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, just the random advertisements cycling through.
Yeah. There were ads and a lot of reviews and stuff. And I remember there was a review for Monster Hunter Try, and I was like, holy shit, that is the coolest game ever. Because I was like obsessed with dinosaurs, right? As a kid. Dinosaurs and
Yeah.
dragons. Mostly dinosaurs, though. So when you show me a game that's like a combination of dinosaurs and dragons and is like kind of realistic in a way, and like I was like, that looks so damn cool. And so I managed to convince my mom to get it. It was rated teen, right? And I wasn't technically allowed to play T-rated games because I wasn't 13 yet, and my parents are like the one parents that actually followed ESRB guidelines. And
Oh, okay. Yeah, the
yeah,
ratings.
yeah, they actually were like, you can't play teen games till you're 13 and so on. And
And you
I
waited till you were 13, or
yeah,
did
of course,
you?
yeah, I would no. I
Okay.
managed to convince my mom because the only when I talked to her about it, I was like, the only reason it's rated teen is because there's alcohol in it, right? Because you can drink alcohol. So I promised her that I would never drink
a defining
alcohol
feature
in
of
the
the show.
game. I had to like literally promise her that I wouldn't go and sit like in the tavern and drink alcohol. It was yeah. So I I told her I wouldn't, and I got it, and I went home and I played it, and I was obsessed with that game for like so long.
And how far did you get in try when you were younger
I
anyway?
think Royal Ludroth probably. I didn't get very far at all. I spent most
Sure.
of my time just walking around Mocha Woods, like observing the Jaggy. It was like I was like like it was so cool to me. Just the way all the monsters acted like so realistically. Like it was just the most immersed in any, like I didn't, I wouldn't have called it immersion at the time because I didn't know what that meant, but it was just it was so cool to me. I was horrible at games. Like I yeah, I remember I would always make my friends play the arena mode with me and split screen, and they would always get like really annoyed because they'd be like, dude, we don't want to play this dumb game. Like,
I was about to ask if they imported their saves on their Wiimotes because that's one of
no
my
one.
favorite
I
things.
knew no one who played it. The one only memory I ever have of anyone else with Try was one time that I was on the playground right at my school for recess, and I was talking to this girl, and I brought it up, and she was like, and she was totally lying. Like, I don't know how, like, why, but she was like, oh, I know that game. I know Monster Hunter Try. I play it all the time. I love that game. And I was like, what? No way. So I sat and talked with her about it, and we voice crack. I sat and talked to her about it, and I mentioned the Jaggy, and at some point I brought up how I had found the wyvern eggs in the Rathalos nest, right? And I didn't know what they were for. So I brought up that I had found them, and she told me, she was like, oh, yeah, I've seen those all the time. She told me you bring them back to the camp, and then it hatches. And she told me it hatches into a talking Jaggy that follows you around and is like your partner. So that was what she told me.
If only it was true.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that at the time.
Wait, did you actually try it?
Yes, I did. I didn't. I don't think I ever actually was successful. Like, I think so I don't think I ever found out she was lying. It wasn't until I was older and I remembered that story, and I was like, oh, she was just making shit up. She probably didn't even play the game.
Yeah, she probably just wanted to talk to you.
Yeah, and yeah. I used to call them Jag-Eyes back then instead of Jaggy.
Oh man, I mispronounced names like so much when I first started playing. It was so bad.
Yeah, so we had the great Jag-Eye, and it was, yeah, it was definitely a different era. But I also remember I didn't know how the online mode worked, so I would go there, and I would join people's lobbies, and I would just waste space. Like, I wouldn't go on any quests. And I remember reading in the chat, people would be like, who is this guy? Like why isn't this person joining us? And I was just like, oh man, the city is so cool. And I would just walk around and like talk to the NPCs and look at the cool stuff and not drink alcohol so my mom didn't get mad at me and take away the game, because I was like,
yeah, that'd be tragic.
yeah. So yeah, that was my experience with Try. I got a 3DS. I remember right when it came out, and I also had a Wii U. And so when 3 Ultimate came out, I don't even remember how I learned about it, but when it came out, I got it, and I remember I watched, at the time, I think it was Pro Jared's video, that was like how to play Monster Hunter or something, and I was like, oh, and it was like I finally was able to actually play it, and I played it for about 100 hours according to my old save that I still have. Actually, I don't have my Try save anymore, unfortunately. I still have my copy of Try from back then, but not my save.
Interesting.
But I got both the Wii U and 3DS versions of 3 Ultimate. I have no clue how I convinced my mom to buy me both. But I got both, and so I could transfer saves between them, and I would actually play both. I played it mostly on Wii U, but I would play it on 3DS, like on the bus to school. I still had no friends who played it.
And you still had
None of
nobody to play with? Yep.
No one. I tried to get so many people into it. No one I knew cared or wanted to ever get into it. I had it.
Dang.
It was sad. I had friends on 3D, who played 3DS, so it's not like I didn't have that. But
yeah, I was wondering if they were like different consoles or just
nope,
not interested at all.
Nope. I had plenty of friends who liked games, who played games with me, but none of them ever wanted to play Monster Hunter. It just wasn't interesting to them. They didn't think it, I don't know why, but so I would always play it by myself, but I only got, I don't remember how far I got, but
how old were you when 3U came out?
3U, what year did that come out? 2013? So I would have been 12. I think I was 13 when I played through most of it, though.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't that long from when you tried Tri.
No. I was somewhere between 9 and 11 when I played Tri. And then I was probably 12 and 13 when I played 3U. And I don't remember how far I got, but I know for sure that I was wearing Baroth armor. I think I had done up to the Lagiacrus Repel in the village. I don't know that for sure, but I think that's about how far I got. I loved that game too. That game I actually played on Tri. Tri, I spent most of my time
just observing
the world. Yeah, but with 3U, I actually tried to progress. And then 4U came out, and I played that. I was absolutely obsessed with it, and I was finally old enough to actually be good. Not good, but to be competent. And so
to know it, yeah.
4U was the first Monster Hunter game I ever actually finished. I finished the village, To me, that just was the game. Since I still didn't have anyone who played it or wanted to play it, I didn't really see the online part as part of the game, I definitely had no clue that there was exclusive monsters there and stuff.
There was an entirely separate progression system and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, that part I knew, but I didn't think that the progression system would go any further than the village, I didn't know high rank was a thing, for example.
Okay.
I thought it was all just going to be the same monsters, but just, for multiple people to do and without a story. And so I slayed Shigaru Magala, and then that was the end of the game. So I just stopped playing. I knew there's a post game is what I saw it as, the high rank story, because I didn't really know how the expansion system worked, but yeah.
So then you at least visited Dundorma then.
Oh yeah, I went there, and I think I did some things there. I don't know if I still have my 4U save or not, but I do still have my Generations save for sure. I got into Generations and I didn't end up liking it as much for some reason. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I think for me it was mostly just coming from 4U. The thing that kept me playing 4U was the story, as a kid.
Yeah, and Generations is kind of flat on that end.
Yeah, so going to Generations having no story, I was just kind of oh, okay. I never would have told you back then that I didn't like it. But I was 15, I think, playing Generations, and I just kind of got bored of it. I played, I think, 40 hours or something. I know for sure I was wearing Bulldrome armor. When did they add Bulldrome armor to Monster Hunter, now that I think about it? Because there's no Bulldrome armor in...
I think it's just an extension of Bullfango. Might have been Portable Third. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think
because it does show up there.
Because it's not in. There's no Bullfango armor at all in DOS, or probably not Freedom Unite. I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
Anyways,
I think it's just the masks.
Yeah, the Bullfango mask. But um, yeah, I played Generations, and I was starting to like kind of get into the Monster Hunter, not the community, but like starting to watch Monster Hunter YouTube videos like Gaijin Hunter and stuff, like all that kind of mainstream stuff.
Yep.
And
It'd be around the time that they were getting popular too.
right. And so, I heard about Double Cross. It's kind of interesting. It's like the first time I had ever known about a game that was releasing in Japan that was not releasing in the West.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever.
I mean, there were a number of content creators, I think, who were around that time playing Double Cross
Right.
and not waiting for Generations Ultimate, which might have been the reason.
Yeah, right. And well, because I don't even think we knew it was ever going to come to the West at that time. And I remember like seeing Dino Valdo, who we now know as Glavinus, and I thought he was like the coolest thing ever, and like, I was really excited and hopeful for that game to come to the West.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I love Dino Valdo as a name. I know Glavinus is
me too.
not bad, but there's just a different edge to it. It's great.
Yeah, same thing with me for Volfalk.
Oh yeah. Him too.
Yeah. Oh wait, no. I remember now. It was because it was for me. It was even now that I think about it, even Monster Hunter Cross. I watched a lot of content for Cross before that came out. I was thinking about it and I was like, wait, well, I was excited for Dino Valdo when that was already in Generations. And I remember now I was even following Monster Hunter Cross before that was released here. But yeah, the main thing that I was excited for was Monster Hunter World, of course, because it was slated to come out the day after my birthday. And I don't remember when I first learned about it. I don't remember watching the reveal trailer. I don't remember any of that, but I just remember being super pumped. And
I remember people being very confused about the reveal trailer too when it first dropped.
Yeah, because it's like, I remember some people thinking it was open world, which is kind of funny considering the Wilds trailer has everyone doing the same thing. And that's the main reason why I haven't come to the conclusion that it's an open world game, because I'm like, I remember some people thinking about that about the World trailer, because it's like there's nothing in the World trailer to make you think it's not.
Yeah.
And
it's definitely closer to that style
right
in the game, but it's certainly
not. And it was it was like 2018, which is like the end, like nearing the end of that every game needs to be open world trend, which I guess we're still kind of in. It's not really over, but for like the last 10 years it feels like every game franchise has been moving towards open world in some way.
Yep.
Because there's just like a big market of people that think open world is like all Monster.
And how far did you how far did you get in World before you decided to transition back to Monster Hunter 1? Because I know you're playing through World right now.
Well, yeah, I've played through World probably like 4 times. When it first came out, I played up to Nergigante. I played through it with my cousin. And we played up to Nergigante. And for some reason, after I slayed Nergigante, I just got kind of bored. And I stopped playing.
To be fair, he is the flagship, so that's fair.
I think I don't know if I saw it as the end of the game or if I just got bored, but to me, I just kind of stopped there. And then let me think. I stopped playing Monster Hunter at all. I just kind of fell off of it. Like, it was just when I got bored of World after Nergigante, I just kind of stopped playing. And I played most of the other games, a lot of Zelda. And Iceborne was announced and released, and I thought about getting it, but I never did. I had my own shit to worry about with high school, and just wasn't all... Like, I didn't think about Monster Hunter very much.
Sure.
And I remember my cousin asked me, if I was going to get it. And I was like, maybe. And then I never did. And then about how long later? I don't know exactly how long, but when I was in college, I was on my Switch and I saw Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate on sale for super cheap. And I'd never played it, right? And
Because you just had it on 3DS.
right,
Gen,
yeah. I just played I just
Did you
played
import your save off of Gen?
No, I didn't. I saw Generations
Okay.
Ultimate on sale and I was like, holy fuck. I haven't thought about Monster Hunter in forever. It was kind of like one of those things where I had like realized, I was like, why, what the hell? Like, why haven't I played a Monster Hunter game in so long? Like that game series used to be like, yeah, it was like I'd forgotten I was a Monster Hunter fan. And I was like, oh shit, that's right, I'm supposed to like this game series. And so I bought Generations Ultimate and I played it. And I was like hooked in it again. I think it was just kind of the gap of time, you know, of not having played a Monster Hunter game in so long that like playing it again, especially Generations Ultimate, was like a big blast of nostalgia, and also just like since I hadn't played it in so long, it all felt so fresh again. And so I played it up.
It's a mix of rediscovering and then learning new things about
and
a
also,
game series that
and
you've
being
already
in
gone
college,
through.
so I was just so much better at games in general. Like I was probably I would have been 17 when World came out, and I'm probably like 20 at this point. You know, 19 at the youngest when I well, no, let me think about it. I would have been, when did Rise come out? What year did Rise come out? 21, or was it 2020?
That was a good question. It should have been 20. They had development issues because of 2020, right?
Right, yeah. So I think it was 2021, early 2021, 21.
Yeah, I don't know the
Yeah.
exact release window.
Yeah. Because 2020 was one of the few years Monster Hunter skipped. Because there was World in 2018 and then Iceborne in 2019, I think.
And then they were doing the console ports, like
Right.
the PC ports because they released on console.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah,
2021. So this would have been 2020, you know. So I had a lot of time to kill, and I played until halfway through high rank. I played about 90 hours of the game, and then I just kind of got busy with college. But another big thing was that Rise had been announced, and it was like the first Monster Hunter game that I remember watching the reveal trailer. Like I was watching that Nintendo Direct, and like I was so excited because it just happened to be announced like right as I was getting my Monster Hunter Renaissance. And so that was the thing for me that made me start like actually interacting with the Monster Hunter community instead of just, you know, being a guy that plays Monster Hunter and doesn't really, you know, think about it much more after I turn off my console. And so I started watching a lot of Monster Hunter YouTubers, joined a lot of Monster Hunter communities like Discord servers. You know, I had a Twitter account at that point and was, you know, like would tweet about Monster Hunter. And made a lot of friends in those Discord servers. And I played Rise, and I loved it, you know? It's kind of funny now because most, like, old heads I know, like, just hate Rise and talk about how much they don't like Rise, but I still love Rise to this day. Even base Rise.
It's like, a fun game.
Yeah, I have so much fun playing that game. And, even base Rise, you know, for me as someone who's just not very good at games, like, sure, it was easy, but it was never, to me, so easy that I was, like, brain dead. I'm sure it would be for me now if I were to replay it, but for me back then, I loved it, and it was kind of the thing that really got me back into Monster Hunter.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part about, like, experience any new Monster Hunter game when you've played enough of them.
Yeah.
Is that judging whether or not a Monster Hunter game's easy is like, okay, well, is it easy because I know Monster Hunter, or is it
like I remember
easy because it's easier than the other things I've experienced?
Like I failed Village and Ogre when I played Base Rise, if I remember right. Like, so to me it was not too easy. It was easy, like it was easier than Generations Ultimate for sure.
Sure.
when I had played that, but I never would have called it too easy, and I definitely wouldn't have even thought of it as that easy of a game if it wasn't for me interacting with the community and seeing, some other takes on it. So I played Rise, and at that time I was kind of big into Super Rat's community in his Discord server. That was kind of the first place that I had like made friends in the Monster Hunter community. And like Super Rad's, his whole thing, right, is 3U. And like
he's a very big third gen.
Right. Yeah. He's an MH3U head. And so I was kind of curious, I was like, man, I still have my Wii U at home set up. I still have my copy of 3 Ultimate. Maybe I should play it again. And even if it's just for the nostalgia. And so I did. And it was the first like time I'd ever gone back to an old Monster Hunter game. Because at this point, keep in mind that I'd only been playing like new Monster Hunter games. Like Generations Ultimate is the closest thing I ever did to going back. And that wasn't even really going back because that released Afterworld here in the West.
Sure.
So I played 3 Ultimate again, and it was like it was crazy. I loved it. I at some point went back and replayed World. I don't remember if it was before or after Rise came out. But
so that would have been like your second time revisiting.
Yeah, that was my second time on PS4. And that time I actually finished the game. Like that time I actually played up until Xeno'jiiva. Did it all with my cousin again, cuz it had been like kind of a joke between us that I had never finished it. I don't remember.
Did you interact with the post game at all, or is it just
no, I didn't.
End game?
It's still for me, because I had never been the kind of player to play grindy games. Like I didn't grind games. Yeah. I didn't. To me, I just played a game until it was over, and then I was done. And at that time, so I played World up to Xeno'jiiva, and then I stopped. And I for some reason I just didn't feel like I liked it as much as I liked Generations Ultimate and Rise. But I didn't dislike it, but I never was like I never felt like a drive to keep playing it for some reason at that time. I feel differently now, but at that time it just
And then
wasn't
how many how much
me.
of the side content in general did you do? Like, did you do any of the Palico gadget stuff, or like any of the upgrading, or is it just the keys?
I think so. I actually don't know. That's a good question.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I for sure did some of the Palico gadgets. I think I didn't do like basically any of them when I did my first playthrough. But I think when I went back to it, I was more entrenched in the community then, so I had learned about those kind of things, that I just didn't know about before. And so I finally did them. Because keep in mind, I'm playing everything solo or with my cousin. Like, I'm not really playing with other people. And so, like, a lot of those things that are a little bit more hidden, like I wouldn't really call the Palico gadgets hidden, but, like, if you're a player who's not playing that much attention,
they are things you have to go out of your way for.
You have to go out of your way for
interact with the systems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, so I went back to 3U and loved it. And I was kind of like, man, I think there's just something about old Monster Hunter that I just like, it tickles my brain in a certain way. And so I was like, you know what, I'll play some more old Monster Hunter games. And I don't remember how much more I played 3 Ultimate. I think it was over 100 hours for sure. I think I got halfway through High Rank Village. And so
That's
I played
decently far.
Yeah. And so the next thing I did was I played Portable Third for the first time ever. I'd never played it before. And it was, it was kind of crazy for me because I was like the first time I had played a new old Monster Hunter, And I really liked it. And so I kind of went on this like, I don't know what you'd call it, this like old Monster Hunter frenzy where I played just a bunch of old Monster Hunter games. Like I played a little bit of Freedom 2. I played I don't remember why I played Freedom 2 instead of Freedom Unite, but I started replaying Try, and then that was a big thing for me. I was obsessed with Try again, and this is when I was like really starting to make friends in the Monster Hunter community and really feel like I was like actually part of the community instead of just kind of observing it. And so like I started streaming at that time. That was so much fun. I'm still so upset that I can't stream because of my horrible horse ranch internet.
Yeah, I'm starting to have streaming issues too, so it's not just you.
I'm like, yeah, I'm still upset about that. I'm glad all my streams are archived because it's just so much fun to go back and watch those and watch me go crazy doing the Diablos grind, which is really funny because now that I've played more DOS and other Monster Hunter games, I'm like, there's so many more efficient ways to do that grind that I didn't do.
Do your old streams have your commentaries or just the gameplay audio?
They have commentary on them. And
oh, interesting.
Like, on not on all of them, but on later ones, I also recorded the chat, so like you can see the chat, and they weren't super big, but I had enough friends at that point that they were, they had people there.
Sure.
And
you're engaging with somewhat of an audience.
Right. Yeah. Like a tiny audience. There would be like 5 people, watching, but they, it wasn't just me.
Yeah,
sitting
that's
there
enough to
game.
at least, yeah. That's enough to at least bounce off of people.
Right. And, so I started playing Try. I finished the village. I did everything except for like 3 village quests. And then, around that time was when the infamous 3-hour dose review came out, and so I gave that a watch, and I thought it was interesting. I remember I didn't really agree with most of the video at that time, but it was interesting. It was enough to make me be like, okay, I should play a PS2 Monster Hunter game. And I played a little bit of Freedom 1. I think just the 1 and 2 star village quests. No, just the 1 star village quests, because they got condensed, if I remember right. So I think that was basically it. And I liked Freedom, but I didn't love it, and I was just kind of like, oh, well, this, that to me, it just like felt like something was off about the game, I was like, I couldn't put a finger on it. But I didn't, I wasn't super into Freedom like I was Try or anything like that. And so what did I do next? If I remember right, I think I was already in the old school Discord because of Super Rad's video he had made about how Mindguard had come back. Oh, no, I remember now. I decided to play a PS2 Monster Hunter game. And, I wanted it to be DOS, of course. But I knew DOS wasn't in English, and I knew that there was no way to go online. And I knew that the online mode was a big part of the games. Like, I still at that point didn't really grind games. I didn't really play games online very much. So I wasn't, like, I wasn't super excited for that. I didn't really want to play them online that much, but I just knew it was part of the game. And I knew it was the main part of the game and the entire reason the games existed. So I was kind of like, you're not going to get a real experience if you don't play online. So I joined the old school Discord and, was talking to people there and started to make some friends. And that was when I decided to play MH1. And so I hopped on 1JP. And that's also on stream. My first 3 play sessions I streamed. And I fell in love with it, like playing online.
And did you do village first, or do you actually go into the hub?
I started the village first. My first stream,
okay.
What I did was I played through the tutorial in the village, and then I went online and I just talked to all the NPCs in the town. And then I went back to the village, I think, and I kept playing. My second stream... I think my second stream I did only online, or I did half in the village and then half online or something like that. And then my third stream I did only the village. So it was kind of like, I did both at the same time, but I started with the village and I did mostly the village first.
So then the PS2 Monster Hunter games would be probably like the first time you interacted with somebody that you didn't know, like already online, like on a
Prob
Monster Hunter game.
Probably not really. I'm sure there was a few errant times like when I played World or something that I did that I
Sure.
can't, that I'm not thinking of, but it was definitely the first time I really engaged with the Monster Hunter community while I was playing. Like it's the first time I ever made a friend playing a Monster Hunter game.
That's interesting.
Yeah. This would have been 2022 or no, 21. Um yeah, I think this was 21. And it was in March. No, it would have been March of 22. No. So about 2 years ago. And so I was 21 years old. Like I didn't really play online games and I was in college at the time out in the faraway land of Nebraska. And it was just kind of one of those things for me that like playing it online just kind of clicked right, and I did whatever. Like I didn't think very hard about like part of why I didn't like online games, I think, very much is because I just kind of liked being able to do whatever, and I feel like playing a lot of online games, I feel an obligation to the people I'm playing with, to play
That's
a certain
fair.
way. And I just never felt that playing Monster Hunter on PS2. And I still think to this day it's probably the one thing for me that differentiates it from something like a Phantasy Star or just any of the other online games I've played is I just feel it feels the most freeing in terms of progression and gameplay. And it's just like there's just something about the gameplay structure that just clicks with me. So I played through all of 1JP up to Fatalis. And yeah, I finished it. And then I went and I started Monster Hunter G, transferred my save over. And just didn't I played it for about 30 hours. It just didn't click the same way for some reason to me. I think for me the big thing was the community. I just didn't feel as much community playing G. The only person who I ever felt like I really loved playing with was Mao, my friend Mao from the old school community, and we played all the time. I remember we had this weird not vibe, but what's the word? We had this weird flow where he's Scottish, I'm American, and I'm a nocturnal American, and he had to wake up at normal human times. So he would wake up and go get a coffee. Like I would ping him around the same time every day, and I'd be like, "You up for some G?" And he'd be like, "Let me go get a coffee." And he'd go get his coffee, and then we play for like an hour, and like super early morning for him at like
That's pretty
3,
funny.
4 a.m. for me. Yeah, and it was like almost every day for a while, and it was fun. But after a while, I just kind of stopped playing it. Which is what made me end up deciding to just go back to 1JP at a certain point. And I was like, you know what? I decided at that point I wanted to try to do every quest in every Monster Hunter game. And I had a bunch of objectives, like trying to upgrade every great sword in every Monster Hunter game and things like that. And I was like, you know what? I'll just go back and try to clear that first for 1JP and then come back to G when I'm fully done with 1JP. And to this day, I'm still doing that. So I still have to upgrade Eternal Annihilator and make Fatalis armor, and that's basically it. But
Just some personal milestones to go through.
yeah.
And then when did you meet the Breakarts team?
Oh God, that's a good question. It would have just been when they posted in the old school server. They posted.
Oh, I must have missed that post.
Yeah. Well, because from what I remember, I started playing DOS. Let me think. No, I guess it would have just been when I talked to them. So like I was super excited for DOS the entire time, right? Because basically the only reason I was playing 1JP was because I couldn't play DOS, and so, when I had watched that 3-hour review, I wasn't really that excited to play DOS. Like, I was curious to play DOS. But after playing 1JP and, like, loving it so much, I was like, wow. Like, there's just no way I'm not going to love DOS. And so I remember there was a lot of different teams at that time who were trying to translate the game.
Yeah, there are actually, I think, like 3 or 4 different people.
Yeah.
At
And
the very least, around the time that they had announced it,
yeah,
they were
like,
like,
I know
yeah, we're gonna do a whole game.
Sando was trying to translate it. I know there was another group that had been claiming they were trying to translate it. For sure, at least. So they were at minimum the third group. There's probably more I didn't know about. And I remember they posted in the old school Discord. I don't remember what exactly they said, but they had posted something about how they were there because they were trying to translate it. And I remember just thinking at the time, like, oh great, you know, here's another group who's gonna translate the game. And I never thought they were actually gonna do it, because there's just been so many different groups of people, you know, that would make different promises.
I was definitely in the same boat. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know if you're gonna commit to this, and
Yeah.
I don't know how you're going to translate this.
But yeah, I was super active in the Discord at that time, and this is before I was a mod there. And so I just kind of ended up talking to them a lot. I remember, I don't remember exactly what. I think I was talking with them about trying to get some of the work that Sando had done in his translation to, you know, kind of like be able to collaborate. I thought like, oh, you know, why would you want to start over from the beginning when you could kind of like, you know, team up with someone else? But at some point, I don't remember why, at some point I started DMing with them, and at a certain point they just asked me if I would test it, and I was like, oh, interesting. I had to really think about it, because I was like, I pledged to not play DOS until it was in English, because such a big part of the experience with 1JP for me was the NPC dialogue, that I was like, there's just no way that that's not going to be the case for DOS too. And so I had to make a decision, you know, because if I was going to test it, I was going to have to play it in Japanese until they had translated the dialogue. And so I was like, you know what? I'll do it. And so I started playing DOS, and that was why I ended up playing on an alt save at first with Lana, my female hunter, who I got about 60 hours in. Because I knew that once they had finally translated all the dialogue, I was going to want to start over on a different save. And so I played, I don't know how far I got on Lana, but I played about 60 hours, like I said, and then they translated all the dialogue, so I switched over to Luty, my main save, and fell in love with it even more, you know, and that's how we ended up to this day, where I have 600 hours in both 1JP and DOS, and DOS is now my favorite video game of all time. I still plan to go back to Monster Hunter G. I think that now that I've played more DOS, which is definitely a lot more similar to G, in some ways, just in terms of the combat and the you know, the items and just kind of the general gameplay systems.
Yeah, they inherited a lot.
Skill points and stuff. I think I'll enjoy G a lot more now, especially because I've been playing a lot of Portable. The Japanese version specifically, which is why I say Portable instead of Freedom. And liking it way more than I thought I would, now that I kind of have more context of just kind of like what the other games were like. Because, like, I think part of the problem is that, like, we always try to treat, and by we I mean the Monster Hunter community in general, people try to treat Freedom as the definitive first-gen experience, right? And so when I played Freedom originally, that's how I was looking at it, right? Because, like, you know, part of why I was playing first, second gen Monster Hunter was because of that 3-hour review. And Jacob literally says in that video, like, don't play Monster Hunter 1, just play Freedom, you know? And so I did that, and, like, I think that's part of why I was not satisfied with that experience, was because, like, just something about it seemed off to me, you know? And I was like, I could just kind of tell I wasn't playing Monster Hunter 1. I
Yeah,
was
I'm
playing.
not a huge fan of that sentiment overall,
Yeah,
unfortunately. And it
me
feels like
too.
it's that way for every generation up till fourth gen, where people are like, well, there are people who really like 4U and GU, and it's kind of in between. But for third gen, you'll get
Right.
recommendations for 3U, second gen,
Yeah.
Unite, and then yeah.
Yeah. And I think with Freedom, it's even worse because the people recommend Freedom not because it has all the content. Most of the time, people think that it has all the same gameplay systems. They just don't think about the fact that it doesn't. It has an upgradable box that the first game doesn't. It doesn't have HRP grinding, which most people haven't experienced anyways since they don't go online. So people just look at the village and they go, oh, sure, there's some differences, like the 1-star quests are condensed, and
That's where
there's,
like reading what a game has changed isn't. I don't think it's sufficient to
I,
really understand
yeah,
how it's
100%
changed.
agree. 100%. And so I think that's part of why I'm enjoying Portable now, because I'm not seeing it as a replacement for anything, or as, just Monster Hunter 1, but on a PSP. It's, to me now, it's its own game. It's its own experience, and I can compare it to what I've played of G and 1 and see what they've changed, how different it is, and just kind of appreciate it for what it is, and not wanting it to be something else.
Yeah,
And
having it fill something else.
yeah, and playing it alongside Dose is really fun to me, just because of the way they both came out around the same time, and kind of were marketed together, and the way they actually, like, it's just super fun to be able to actually hook up my PSP to my PS2 with a USB cable and do the connection to get the granny items, and like just kind of role
Yeah,
play
it's
as a 2006 Japanese Monster Hunter fan. It's
something I wish I
yeah,
could do.
it's kind of weird how well those two games fit together. And I genuinely think a lot of the decisions they made in DOS, like a lot of the ways they kind of doubled down on that design philosophy they had with 1JP and trying to make it a more realistic game with more, like kind of grindy and have more immersive simulator mechanics. I think a lot of the reason that they were comfortable making those decisions is because they were making Portable. Because
It's yeah, it's
Portable
interesting because
is,
they complement each other
yeah,
in like the
right,
exact opposite
right,
ways, where
yeah,
Dose falls short on some things, Portable excels in those things, but
yeah,
falls short in the things that Dose excels
exactly,
in.
exactly. And I think that's a big part of why I like it so much. It's just kind of experiencing it together. It feels like they perfectly designed it in a way where you're supposed to play both at the same time. And it's kind of something we haven't seen ever again, in the series. And honestly, it's probably for the best. I don't want Monster Hunter to have a dual
Yeah, I
release
was just about to
structure.
say the development schedule must have been
Oh yeah,
insane for both teams, or
yeah.
just
And I can't even imagine for the people that were in charge of both. Like Tanaka was a producer on both Portable and Dose, and it's like, how? Like, how did you even do that? Like, Dose alone was a rushed game. How do you produce a rushed game? Like, I can understand why Portable was able to come out in such a short time after G, right? Because it's like you're basically, like, sure, it is its own game, but you're still working on the foundation
you're
of Monster
using
Hunter
a lot of
G. Yeah,
assets that are
you don't
very
have to write
similar. Yeah.
you don't have to write that much new dialogue. Like, there's some new dialogue, but you don't have to start completely over. You don't have to create a new village. You don't have to create new maps. Stuff like that. And so it's just like it's kind of crazy. But yeah, that's how I've wound up where I am today. I still have, I wish I had up my spreadsheet of all my Monster Hunter games I've beat, but I've planned to go back to Monster
I mean, you've got that
Energy.
giant chart, like that Google
Yeah,
sheet, right, in
yeah,
Twitter.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have a Google sheet where it's just every Monster Hunter game and my completion progress on them. And I plan to do all of them. I plan to play the Japanese versions. Eventually, I'm gonna go back to try. I don't. Well, I guess I do technically have to because I didn't do any of the online quests. But I did some of them. I did a very small amount before the server went up. But I'm gonna play the Japanese versions when I can, just because they're the original versions. 5th gen will be the exception because, with 5th gen, there's not 2 different releases. It's just one release. So, but I'm going to play, like Monster Hunter 4, the base game, at some point for the first time. I'm going to play 4G. I'm going to play Cross and Double Cross. And
Sounds like a fun time.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking to Heavy Wings the other day, and I mentioned to him that I plan to do every quest in every Monster Hunter game, and he was basically begging me to not do it for Double Cross. It was like, yeah, but I'm going to be transferring saves.
It is a very big undertaking.
I'm sure. But I think that doing every quest in Monster Hunter Cross and then transferring a save and then doing every quest in Monster Hunter Double Cross,
it does help alleviate. Yeah, it does help alleviate things.
It will probably feel way more manageable.
The other thing I'd recommend you do, and I don't know how you'd feel about it, because you typically tackle one game at a time, is just interspersing the grind of Cross with something else Monster Hunter related at the very least, or it's something completely different.
Right. I've kind of been doing 2 at the same time ever since I started playing Portable. Yeah. Like, I'm playing Dose and Portable right now. Once I'm done with Portable, I'm going to transfer to Portable second. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do when I get to the 3DS games. Because, like, I don't see myself playing Monster Hunter 4 and Monster Hunter Cross at the same time. They didn't really release around the same time at all. So it's not like you're supposed to. I'm probably going to play Tri and Portable second G together. Because those came out not at the same time, but, close enough to each other. That it's possible. It's very easy to see, someone playing both those games at the same time back in the day. Yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do for the 3DS games, but I'm sure I'll have something.
But yeah, 4th gen is certainly an odd generation because its mainline title is technically a portable game.
Right. Yeah.
And its other portable title is just a celebration of a ton of portable games.
Yeah. So it's the portable generation. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really I don't like the idea of playing 2 Monster Hunter games on the same console at the same time, really, Like, I think for me, it's just like I want to dedicate.
Yeah, there's not a big. Yeah, there's not a very big disconnect, I guess, or like difference between.
Right. Like, there's a lot of differences between them. The way you would play
4 Ultimate and yeah.
Yeah, they feel like the same kind of game in terms of the gameplay and the gameplay systems. They both have subquests. They both have very similar feeling combat. The biggest difference between them is the story. But yeah, so that's my story for the most part. My tale. I am excited to see where it goes, where it takes me. I never would have thought that I would end up not only part of the Monster Hunter community, but considered by some people to be a community like figurehead in any way. It's kind of weird. I just was like a guy who talked about Monster Hunter, and then Kogath one day decided that he wanted me to be famous, and so I was like, oh shit. But I'm not that.
I'm
big,
on the spot now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So that's my story. Why don't you talk a little bit about yours?
Okay. I think we started off on like completely opposite foots. Cause I did not like Monster Hunter when I was starting, or when I was before I started, I should say.
Yeah, I'm like
so I had a friend who was obsessed.
I'm like the one
absolutely
person,
obsessed with Freedom.
Like the one person who didn't have that experience where you play it and you hate it, and then you come back
get
later.
Inducted. Yeah,
yeah. I'm like the one guy who played it and actually loved it the first time he played it. But like I said, I was a tiny babby, so I don't even think it really counts.
Yeah, I had 2 friends. One of them was like the one who's like absolutely dedicated to the series. The other one, is the person who would stick around with me a lot longer, but wasn't dedicated necessarily to it. Mm-hmm. And they started in either Freedom 1 or Freedom 2. I don't know which I honestly can't recall. But I remember looking at, I think it was a gameplay of Rathalos in the Forest and Hills. I was like, oh, this is just another dumb hack and slash game, which Monster Hunter totally isn't. But that's the impression that I walked away with. And I think that's one of the hard parts with Monster Hunter as a series is from an outsider looking in, it's hard to realize that the game has a ton of really interesting and deep systems.
Yeah.
It's also not the most flashy game,
Yeah.
especially like back in
And
second gen.
I think part of it too is that like you don't like even if you see the systems and you see how deep they are, I think that when you're new, when you haven't been hooked, you just don't see the point of it. You know, like I remember
It's also like incredibly overwhelming too.
right. Yeah, like you see like all these items and all these quests and all these different mechanics and you're just like, cool. Now what? You know, you're like oh sure, there's a farm and like oh you can upgrade the farm and like get better items. It's like sure, but why do I care? You know, like why do I want to get better items? What does that do for me?
Yeah.
I feel like that part is hard to understand at first.
I feel like they tried for a solid year, kind of like mixing up the games that we played because we do like sleepovers and that sort of thing, to get me to try it. And I'd try it for a bit and then be like, yeah, okay, it's nice. You guys have fun with it. And then they bought it for me. And I think that's when everything changed. They were like, no, you are playing this game. It was when around the time Freedom Unite came out, they're like, we're just all gonna buy it. The friend who had Freedom 2, because they definitely had a Freedom 2 save. They started from the beginning. And I remember because you used to be able to host quests much higher, like at a much higher rank than the people were ready for. I remember doing Tigrex in particular and getting hard carried and also getting hard bodied and being like absolutely hooked from that moment forward. And what's weird is there's like this so this was Freedom Unite, I guess would be the first game that I started with. And there's this weird sense of both Monster Hunter being like a game that I always saw like as being a game that you played with your friends all the time, but it's also a game where my friends kind of fell off. Like they just didn't like the series as much. So I was obsessed all of a sudden.
Yeah, you got obsessed right when
and
they
they were
stopped
like,
being obsessed.
And they were like, yeah, this is fun and all. And I remember because I had to force my way through the end of low rank into high rank. And then they would stop. That's around the time that they stopped playing. And obviously the hub, like it was the Gathering hub, and the hub is scaled for at least 2 players. And we're really, really struggling to get through it. And eventually getting them to play occasionally through high rank and then doing like G rank by myself. Like it was a mix of, wow, I know how cool it is to have friends and to mess around with them, but it was also a really lonely experience. And it was fun. I don't think I got to G rank before Try came out. But I remember being absolutely obsessed with the game, and I'm sure I didn't understand as many of the systems as, despite me being older than you when I started, I probably didn't know as much of what was going on with Monster Hunter in general. I just knew that I liked the combat and everything along those lines. And Try dropped, and then the friend who wasn't playing Freedom 2 joined me in Try, and we just did, I guess, a regular playthrough of it. We went from low rank till the final boss and did the final boss a few times.
How old were you when you played Try, do you think?
Probably like, when did Try come out? Was it
2010, I think, in the West? 2009 in Japan.
I have to do math. This hurts. Hold on.
That's what being born in 2001 is nice, because I can always just take the last 2 digits of the year and subtract 1.
Hold on.
And I know how old I was.
Hold on. I got this.
Especially being born in January.
So it'd be 14 years ago, right? Something like that.
Sure, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Vaguely.
Okay. So I would have been 14. So I was around 13 when.
So you were about as old as I
Unite.
was when I played 3U.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And I remember getting into arguments. I was one of those, for some reason, throughout third gen, I was still obsessed with Freedom Unite and second gen. I remember getting into really dumb arguments with people online about third gen
Yeah,
versus
complaining about the
second gen.
Tri-Babies, huh?
Yeah, yeah, and uh, looking back on it, it was like, why did I care so much? Uh, but Tri had kind of a similar community culture at the time, or at least from what I remember of Tri's culture. I'm sure other people had different interactions. Um, there was this sense that people didn't really want to play any other Monster Hunter game but Tri, and it did come out on a Nintendo console, so it wasn't like there was
Right.
much overlap between a PlayStation. What typically when you had the consolers, there were that many people playing Nintendo consoles and PlayStation consoles at the same time.
Right.
So that's a contributing factor. But it was kind of like the same divide that you had, or that you currently have in World, where it's like there's a disconnect between the players that only play World and people who have experienced or have played a game that came before World. Like I felt like it was a similar level of this is
Almost like
different enough to be
right. From what I've kind of seen,
yeah.
I almost feel like the Freedom Unite versus Tri debate was very similar to the World and Rise debates we have now. That, well, I should say we, that people have now. I don't really
because they were
but
because they I mean it was just the series going in a different direction, and when it
Right.
does that, you know, you're gonna have people who are like, I don't like the direction it's going, and people are like, I love the direction it's going, and I don't really get the point of the previous direction. Like that's just a stepping stone for the future, old man. And yeah, and graphically it's very different and that sort of thing. Obviously it exhausts and the fights feel, it's a console game versus a portable game. And I hadn't really had experience with or much experience with the previous portable games at that point, or the PS2 games. So I didn't really have a frame of reference. I just knew what I wanted, or like the direction I wanted the series to go in when I was playing through Freedom Unite, which was I just wanted to see more areas, or like be able to explore the second gen world in more detail. And the fact that they were like, no, we're just gonna start from scratch.
Suddenly having
we're gonna include
yeah.
And
reboot,
they didn't and they didn't include like my favorite weapon type, which eventually I switched over to Gunlands. And to not have that and Tri, it was like a big disconnect.
So even back then you were a Gunlance guy. You've been a Gunlancer for.
I started off as a longsword person, unfortunately. Or fortunately,
if it makes you feel any better, apparently I had misremembered this. I had memories that I was a greatsword player from the beginning, right?
Yep.
Imagine my horror when I booted up my 3U save, and I had only longswords. I had completely misremembered. I think in my head, the longsword and the greatsword were like the same weapon. And I do think in Tri, I do think in Tri, I do think I played the greatsword a fair bit. And you know, that one you actually had to unlock the longsword, so I know I didn't play it that much. You had to unlock longsword, right? Or was that just switch axe?
In Tri, it's switch axe and longsword.
Okay,
the switch axe you can buy online, I think, a lot earlier, but longsword, no matter what, you have to.
Yeah. So I don't think I ever played longsword in Tri, because I don't think I got far enough to unlock it. So I do think I started with greatsword, but in 3 Ultimate, I definitely was a longsword player, apparently.
Yeah, I think there was a quest. My friend was trying to teach me how different weapon types worked. And I remember doing a Rathian hunt where we literally were just holding down the guard button and turning back and forth as she charged. And it like blew my mind that you could block things. And, and that's how I got hooked on Gunlands. That and I think White Fatalis would kind of cement that as my favorite weapon, because it kind of bounced back and forth quite a bit. But its matchup with White Fatalis in particular is something I absolutely adore, even if it's a fight that people don't like these days.
I think it's kind of mid.
And then you know, I gotcha. And I remember one of my dreams for the PSP games, because obviously I had to, whenever I was playing with my friends, obviously we had to go over to each other's houses to play together. I remember when we were playing Try, I was like, oh, it's so cool that you can play online with your friends. I like one day want to play online on a PSP game. Wouldn't that be revolutionary? And I don't remember when Ad Hoc Party came out, but it must have been around the same time as 3U. So there's a giant gap between Try and 3U, obviously, because P3rd, you know, is
Did you know about
wasn't
Portable
released
Third?
in the West. I did. And there was somebody in Ad Hoc Party who imported it. Like, because I eventually made a group of friends in the Ad Hoc Party community on PS3. And they went out of their way to import it, and they thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I'm like, I don't know that I want to commit to spending a ton of money to import a game. Like, it wasn't that expensive, but it was also more expensive than buying a, you know, like
a
3U.
And game at a GameStop or something.
I think around the time that they had bought it, like, we kind of either knew about 3 Ultimate, or I was still obsessed with Freedom Unite. So I was like, why would I play this over Freedom Unite?
Right. It has more content.
And I mean, it's yeah, I just had this, I don't know. There's this weird, it's been something that I've been trying to figure out, like, why I'm so attached to Gen 2 in general. But throughout, I think, like, even up to Monster Hunter World, despite playing a ton of other Monster Hunter games, I would always be playing Freedom Unite. It just resonated with me in a way that the other Monster Hunter games that I was playing just... And not to say that they didn't, because they're fun, and I had a lot of fun messing around with them. But I was just weirdly obsessed with it.
Yeah. So here's a question for you. You say that part of why, like, you wanted to see more of the world of Gen 2. At that time, do you think you would have considered Gen 1 to be part of the world of Gen 2 because of Freedom Unite having, like, the old maps and so many things from first gen? Like, do you think...
mean, that's... Yes and no. So, like, when I said I want to discover more of the world, you know how in game design you have obviously elements of the zones that you can explore around and that you can interact with.
Right.
I would look at the background and be like, I want to go there, like, off where I can't move, you know? And so in that way, like, in the way that I was thinking I'd be able to explore those places that I couldn't previously explore, and just interact with the world in more interesting ways. No, the Gen 1 games wouldn't have done that, but I also don't know that I would have... It's hard to say, like, whether or not I would have liked Gen 1 or not.
Teenage Alpha would have freaked out over the Sunbreak Jungle. Being able to go inside of the temple and, like...
Oh, the temple and everything else? Yeah. No, if that released, like, next game, I'd have been like...
Yeah. Well, first of all, you probably would have been like, how the hell did Nintendo release this console that is better than home consoles as a hybrid in 2000 and I don't know.
I'm sure I would have been equally as conflicted, though, because I'm sure I still would have played Freedom Unite. And the comments that people have whenever you play an older game is like, oh, you're just doing it because of nostalgia. And for me, it's like, I'm not necessarily doing it to relive how I felt about it as a kid. It's just, I happen to like the aesthetic and the way the world's presented and the way that they handle certain things in Gen 2.
That's definitely one thing about my story that I appreciate the most. Like, I always say, like, I would kill to go back and be able to play DOS in 2006 on the official servers, but at the same time, like, playing them as an adult for the first time, it just feels really good to know that, like, nostalgia has nothing to do with
It's
why
not a
I liked
factor.
it.
And it
Yeah.
blows my mind on like with your story, because there have been so many people that have tried to get like into anything older than third gen. Like I feel
Right.
like third gen is at least accessible enough to
100%.
the people that play classic
Yeah.
Monster Hunter.
If
Like
you were
they'll
to
be like,
split-
oh, you should play up till like P33U
Right.
and
Yeah,
just
if you
stop.
were if I had to split all of Monster Hunter into two halves only, I would probably split it after Try. Like everything Try
Yeah.
and earlier would be one thing, and everything Portable Third and after would be a second thing. I still think there's way more divisions beyond that. You know, like I think Try and 1JP are like completely different games, like in experiences at all. Like they're not similar to me, but compare like just something about them is like the game design philosophy in Rise Sunbreak feels relatively similar to me as it does in Portable Third.
Yeah, I actually think it's a spiritual successor to
Yeah,
Portable
100%.
Third in a lot of ways.
But I also think Portable Third is a spiritual successor to Portable Second. So it's like,
yeah,
you know,
that's
why would we
yeah.
draw the line there then? You know, it's like,
Yeah,
it's hard to say.
but I guess there's more parallels that I can draw. I
Yeah,
think, between
yeah, they feel like more like gameplay or not even gameplay. It feels like audience. It feels like Portable Third is where they realize what their audience is. To me,
yeah.
like Try and earlier, it feels like they're appealing to a much older audience than with Portable Third is very explicitly, you know, it feels more like targeting a preteen and younger audience than, you know.
And I have similar feelings about, I think, like a flagship like Magnamala that I
Sure.
probably did when I first saw Zinogre.
Right.
And it's going to be hard for me to articulate exactly what those were. But yeah, around third gen, I'd be playing a lot throughout the entire thing. I'd be playing a lot of Freedom Unite, and I know my interactions with the community weren't super great on explaining why I'm obsessed with second gen or specifically Freedom Unite, because I think by the time 3U would come out or came out, I would start going back and playing some of the older titles. It started with Freedom 2 because my friend who got me into the series was obsessed with Freedom 2 specifically and not Freedom Unite.
Right.
And I just kind of wanted to figure out why, you know?
Yeah.
Because the prevailing consensus, even today, is Freedom Unite's just a better version of Freedom 2. Why would you play Freedom 2? And for them, there's certain decisions and certain elements of Freedom 2 that Freedom Unite just doesn't have. And those things appeal to them more strongly, and they like the progression of Freedom 2 better than they do of Freedom Unite. And I respect that now, and I'm playing with Freedom 2 with Adam again, and it's cool to see somebody else experience Freedom 2 before Freedom Unite, because there's not very many people who do that. It's interesting to see their reactions versus what I assume my reactions were. It's hard once you start playing so many Monster Hunter games. It's hard for me to remember specific things. There are some standout moments, and I know I've had a lot of standout moments throughout the series, but it's hard to remember if that's just me kind of making it up in my own head or if it was an actual thing that happened. And I'd play through 3U. I didn't really like 3U's community as much. I know I didn't like the saturation and the colorfulness of 3U as much. But it'd be kind of a similar story to Try. When I first played through it, I just beat the game and got up to the final boss and was like, yeah, I've experienced everything. I'm good.
Were you playing on Wii U or 3DS?
I was playing on Wii U.
Okay.
I didn't start with 3DS.
Yeah, you weren't.
And I
didn't
notice any of
like
the
me, who you didn't play both at the same time.
No, I didn't. I didn't notice any of the performance issues either on the Wii U.
Yeah, I definitely didn't either when I was a kid.
I liked. I was also playing Smash at the time and like some of the other Wii U games. I just thought it was cool. I thought it was
Yeah.
neat to have it in a higher resolution.
I remember being absolutely like amazed at the idea of a game being on two consoles at the same time and letting you transfer between them. It was like, to me, it was like as revolutionary as like the Switch was, where I was like, holy shit, I could play this game on my TV at home, but like take it on a portable console to go. It was like absolutely insane to me. I thought it was like, I genuinely thought it was like gonna be huge, like a huge thing. I thought it was gonna be a huge popular game because of that feature, you know, and would like every game on the Wii U from that point on would have that feature, and like, you know, of course that didn't happen. You know, like 3 people played 3 Ultimate, and then like 3 out of the 4 Wii U owners played it, and then like that was it. But yeah, that feature was insane to me.
I think one of the things that's interesting about 3U's, not to say it's a bad game. I like 3U. It's probably my least favorite game in the series. And it's interesting that it is, because it should be, like, based on my own understanding of myself, it should have a higher standing than Try, because it has the gun lance. It reintroduces monsters that I'm absolutely obsessed with, like Nargacuga. And I experienced Nargacuga in 3U before I experienced it in Portable Third, so I wasn't used to all of its new, like, the new moves that it introduced with it. But there were certain gameplay decisions, and still are, like, certain gameplay decisions and mechanics that I just didn't like. I didn't like the saturation that they'd done for the game. Like, I thought it looked too colorful. I was one of those edgier, like, teenagers who really liked the monster part of Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
And that idea.
I was kind of the same, but I, you know, starting with Try, I feel like I just didn't really. Like, I think if I had played Freedom Unite, which, like, I didn't really say this, but when I played Try, I just had never even considered the possibility of there being
That there be
other
another
Monster Hunter
game.
games.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
kind of funny because you think it would be obvious with the giant 3 in the title, but it was like I never like even though I was so obsessed with Monster Hunter, and unlike you, I was obsessed with Try specifically, but I wasn't like territorial about it. You know, it wasn't like when 4 came out, 4 Ultimate came out, I wasn't like, man, this isn't Try. Like, I was just like, I was obsessed with Monster Hunter specifically. So you think I would have like gone on YouTube and like just looked up Monster Hunter and saw like a bunch of old Monster Hunter games, but no, I just never really ever considered the fact that they existed until I went back and played 3 Ultimate that one time and started to play older games. And yeah.
Yeah, I think my disagreements with the Try community, over whether or not it was like over Freedom Unite and playing older Monster Hunter from Try, was more so I wanted people to play both, not so much
Right.
not so much for people to stop playing Try, because I did like it. I love Lock Lack, and I think that's one of the things that really hurt 3U in my eyes, is like I just like console Monster Hunter cities better than I like portable hubs.
Right.
Because portable hubs are nice and they're intimate, but they're not as grandiose, and it's not as
Sure. Yeah, there's nothing that compares to having a different physical location to go to, and it feels more like, and it's kind of funny because to me, I feel like it makes me more connected to the village too. It feels way more personal, you know. Like, I think about Jumbo Village, and it feels like mine, you know. Like, it feels like I'm the only hunter there. All the other hunters are in Dundorma. Whereas, like,
it definitely leads to like 2 different gameplay experiences for both. Like, not just that like you're hunting with other people, but like that the experience of playing offline, or even if you were playing online alone, it would feel substantially different than playing Village alone, and not just because of the scaling. There's just a culture about it.
Right.
That and Try was the first game, like, obviously be my first console experience, so I finally got to participate in things like events when they were dropping for the first time, and to discover, like, the Western community had a lot of time to engage with Try because it was again, it was the only newer Monster Hunter title. So it was a lot of discovering how things worked for the first time. Like none of that was documented. Um, there weren't people who knew what they were doing, when it first came out. Um, it was participating in a bunch of theories, a lot of the examples that come to mind are from Pokemon, like the rumors about Mew being hidden underneath the truck.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like it was that era of
Right.
it could be anything. This game has like limitless potential until you get to the end. Um, but even when you reach the end for the first time, you don't really realize you're done.
Right.
And so it was neat to be a part of that, and I felt like there was less of that in 3 Ultimate. Not to say it was absent, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah, it was definitely the first Monster Hunter game that came out when like I can think of there being major YouTubers as like a thing that existed. Like sure they were there around Try, but like 2013, like around that time I feel like is when YouTube was like starting to become a big thing. At least that I remember. Maybe for me it's just because of my age, but like for example, like when I played Try, I just did whatever. But when I played 3 Ultimate, like I looked it up on YouTube and I watched, like I said, Pro Jared's like how to play series, and like that's basically the only reason I actually knew what I was doing a bit more when I played 3 Ultimate. And so there's just a little bit less of that mystique because like I feel like by that time people were looking things up on the internet and like not that they weren't before then, but I feel like by that time, the kind of game facts culture of just like spreading lies on forums was toned down a little bit,
Well, there certainly were a lot of rumors circulating, but it wasn't, it wasn't necessarily as info dense or as numeric dense. Like it wasn't about the data that was in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And the transition from 3rd gen into 4th gen was interesting because at that point I had played at least 4 Monster Hunter games, being Freedom 2, Freedom Unite, Try, and 3 Ultimate. And I remember seeing a trailer for Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate and being absolutely obsessed with it. Like in a similar way to World's release trailer, they showcased Tigrex coming back, and it was the first time he came back, at least in the West, since Freedom Unite. And they had like really cool, in the demo that they showcased, there's a lot of really cool environment interactions that don't exist in 4 Ultimate.
Right.
You do have like ledge climbing, you have like this whole aerial component. But the dynamics of like Tigrex chasing you down and suddenly Rathalos shows up and like starts messing with the environment, that doesn't really happen in 4 Ultimate, but I remember being like, wow, this is like what I wanted from the interactions, like to be expanded upon like in Freedom Unite. Not to say that underwater wasn't an expansion, but like you got to explore the world more. It looks more open world.
You'd be able to
totally
go.
Wasn't.
You'd be able to do those. Like it probably felt to you like you could do those things where you could look out into the background and be like, oh, I want to climb that, and then you could actually go climb that.
Yeah, it gave the impression of it was like, oh, more of that adventure sort of like go where you want sort of feel. And I'd play 4 Ultimate. That's when one of my friends started getting back into the series, and we'd play through that for the first time, and that's when I'd just get really conflicted because 4 Ultimate goes back to that sort of desaturated style and is more story heavy and features a lot of the monsters that were missing from 3rd gen, and it does address a number of my complaints that I had at the time for 3rd gen. But it also had things that, like, again, I wasn't as big on by comparison to Unite, and like again, it was just this major source of conflict for me was figuring out why the heck do I still like Unite um this much
Yeah.
when we're in 4th gen already, when um we've got all this crazy stuff. Part of it was because Gunlance kind of sucks in 4th gen. Not terribly so, but worse than it does in Freedom Unite, which is saying something. Um, but around that time is when I was like, all right, I'll, if I like 2nd gen so much, I'll start to play older games instead of newer games.
Right.
Was around the time before Ultimate came out. And I ended up importing Monster Hunter 2 along with
what year is this, do you
1
think?
and G. It must have been so World released in 2018, right?
Right. January 26.
When did 4 Ultimate come out? Because it was between 4 Ultimate and Generations Ultimate.
15? No, 2014. I think it was 20 cuz Monster 4 came out 2012 in Japan, and I think it was 2013 was 4G, and then 14 was 4 Ultimate. I think something around that time at the very least. It was for sure before 2015, because 2015 was Generations, or 2016.
Yeah, and Generations, it blew my mind, but I'll get into that.
I didn't even think about that, being obsessed with Unite and then suddenly seeing Poke back in a game.
It's back. Yeah, anyway. So yeah, it must have been between the two. And again, I'd play through 4 Ultimate. I actually did interact with the end game, which is something I didn't do in the 3rd gen games, like interacting with the talisman system. Mm-hmm. I didn't really do that. I'd get up to Abyssal and Lucent. I thought those were neat fights, but I didn't go out of my way to grind in the same way that somebody who would have really liked those games probably would have. I also didn't really understand, at that time I didn't really understand like mix sets or like playing optimally in terms of like doing enough damage and what have you. Like I wasn't that into the games. I was mostly like, hey, these games are fun action games, and I adore the action. I'll mess around and grind to my heart's content just because it's fun, but I'm not going to min max in the same way. And so I'd import the PS2 games and a number of the Japanese games. Because around that time I started it must have been either late high school or early college. I don't remember. And I'd go back and beat Monster Hunter 1's Village. And this is the English version of Monster Hunter 1, not the JP version. And my impressions of it were kind of the same as Freedom 1, because around that time I'd also played Freedom 1, where I was like, it's fine. It didn't I wasn't going to be as obsessed with it as Freedom Unite because I liked the way that they had revamped some of the AI.
Right.
I thought it was, again, I thought it was neat to be in a different village. It's like, these are the same fights, and I like doing the same fights because I like the game. But, it's missing Gunlance. It's okay. It's very similar to...
It probably felt like playing Freedom Unite with, like, a fourth of the features and mechanics and systems that you liked.
Yeah, it Freedom Unite, but less, and obviously I didn't have... I wasn't playing with the Gunlance. It just felt like I knew at the time, because I played Try, and I knew how much the online mode meant. Like, it felt like, yeah, I beat this, and it was something that I marked off the checklist, but it wasn't something that I was like, oh, this is really, really cool. Because I wanted to experience Mindguard, and I knew Mindguard was the thing, and the online mode was the thing. But I knew I also, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't go online with Monster Hunter 1. And with Dose, it was a very similar thing. I got stuck in Dose. I remember getting up to Plesioth. And and eventually beating him. It took me, I think, till like the 45-minute mark, and I was like, okay, I finally beat him. And after I beat him, I was like, all right, I'm exhausted. And okay, so now I remember. So this must have been like my first year of college. In my second year, my sister's around the same age, and she graduated, and our graduation trip was to go to Europe. I remember being in Europe when they announced Generations on 3DS, and I had my 3DS with me, and I actually had to um, I had to go out of my way to figure out how to download it in Europe on a North American 3DS. It was a pain in the butt. But I remember watching Tigrex, because that one of the reveals obviously in the trailer is Tigrex versus Gammoth. And I remember just like getting hit by a wave of nostalgia. And I was like, okay, I know this is nostalgia, like this is totally just nostalgia. Um but I yeah, I it was kind of like having a Smash reveal for like your favorite Smash character.
That's kind
Um
of a it's actually a apt description for I feel like a lot of what Generations is like doing. It's like kind of is like a Smash game for Monster Hunter.
yeah, it's like everyone is here, and kind of,
Yeah,
but not really.
yeah, it's like the
And
closest everyone is here you're ever gonna get in Monster
I
Hunter.
remember being so excited and being like, I'm gonna be back in the exact same spot as Freedom Unite. Like they're showcasing all of these monsters that I absolutely adore, and Generations is a fun celebration, but it's also, I mean, it's a very grindy game. And I do like that. That would be the game that I interacted with the post game like quite a bit, and the deviants remind me a lot of um the power difference between like the player and the monster. Obviously, you have hunter arts and those sort of over the top things, but like uh they felt like this sort of overwhelming force that I kind of missed um from playing Unite, where it's like, how the heck am I going to beat this thing? Like, I love those moments in Monster Hunter
Right.
where you end up in a situation and you're like, how do I do this? Like with Plesioth and Dose, I was like, oh my god, I'm going to fail. I've tried everything that I know, and this like for somebody else, they'll be like, I quit. But for me, I'm like, that is my biggest motivator. I need to, because that's where you grow as a player. It's like your back's against the wall, you know. Uh, so it was cool to have that sort of those sort of longer hunts, those longer battles of attrition with the deviants. And then they announced Monster Hunter World. And around the time of Generations, like because I had such a nostalgic attachment to Monster Hunter, I would start saving up for a microphone. Um, to I was obsessed with some YouTubers. Obviously, you have Gaijin and some of those people, but the person I was following for the longest time since Monster Hunter Try was Shepard, and they had like the Teamwork podcast, and I just thought that was so cool. I obviously couldn't afford a capture card or anything along those lines. Um, and I thought I had played enough Monster Hunter games to have some degree of insight into Monster Hunter, and I had things I wanted to say because obviously I was still obsessed with Freedom Unite. Um, and there weren't very many, and I guess there still aren't very many people with a positive outlook on anything again before P3rd. Um, there are more than there used to be, but
Right.
it's not nearly
Yeah.
as much.
I kind of describe it as like I don't know if this is just because of kind of my own experience and when I decided to get involved in old Monster Hunter, but it almost feels like in some ways classic Monster Hunter is having like a renaissance in some ways. I think a lot of the people that were a little bit more disappointed in Rise, I think a lot of them were wanting to find Monster Hunter games to play that were not Rise, you know? And so for a lot of those people, since Iceborne, there's basically been no new Monster Hunter game they've been like really obsessed with, and I think it's made a lot of people, not a lot of people,
Like
but
go
it's
on
made
personal journeys.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, like I think there's a lot of people who played older games that would not have otherwise. Not, and there's a lot of people that are Try is kind of having its own little renaissance right now, where I think a lot of the people who grew up with that game, like me, are now in their early 20s, and that's like the perfect nostalgia bait time, to like, it's like when you first start really being nostalgic for things and going back to them, and so
there are a number of content creators, obviously, with the server being back up.
Now having the old school server is like, it will never go back to, the way it was in 2004, 2006, 2008, whatever, obviously. But there's just, there's more of a community now for DOS than there has been since 2011,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it'll just keep growing from here. Like it'll plateau at a certain point, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I do think
it'll be interesting to see how the community sentiments around different things evolve.
It does feel to me personally like things are starting to U-turn, at least in some ways. At the very minimum, I think people will know that there are old games and that there's a lot of people who play them online still, and I think just in general, when people see that, they'll just assume there's something worth playing about them, and even if most people don't play them, it'll just be something that's known,
And it'll be fascinating to see how people who start with the new game react, and how that subculture that's going to form around that.
Right.
And it's interesting that Monster Hunter has so many different subcultures.
Yeah.
It's hard to find somebody, it's very hard to find people who have enjoyed the series as a whole, from the very first game to the latest game.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a lot of people who prefer parts of it, and that's fine. I'm not necessarily trying to call people not a true fan, but
I'm not trying to make myself sound better than anyone else or anything, but I do always feel weird because I feel like I'm one of the only people who I have Monster Hunter games that I like less than other Monster Hunter games, but I don't really think there's any that I don't like playing, or that I see as I feel like it puts me in a unique position. I think that's part of why some people value my opinion, is because I don't really I obviously have.
It's not necessarily reflective of the majority's stance on things.
Yeah, I'm I obviously have a little bit of tribalism towards the games I like the most. And I'll always be the DOS guy for a lot of people, even if I end up playing other Monster
it's also
games
hard
at some point, but
it's also hard not to be defensive of those games when the prevailing sentiment of most of the community is that they're not worthwhile playing.
Yeah, I think it's just, but the fact that I spend more time defending DOS than I do talking about why DOS is better than, other game. I'm not this is why you should play DOS instead of World.
I'm also not out to convince people that a game is better than
remember before
another
we
one.
started the podcast, you told me that was your goal, right?
Yeah.
You said you were gonna. That's
my deep underlying
goal.
desire.
You rubbed your hands together evilly, and then you said you were gonna make everyone play Freedom Unite instead of Try. It was kind of weird.
Yeah. Nobody's allowed to play any other game but Freedom Unite now. Around between Generations and Generations Ultimate is when I started considering talking about Monster Hunter and doing Monster Hunter content creation in general. Obviously I didn't have enough money for a microphone or a good enough setup, in my opinion, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to that sort of stuff. Not to say that I'd call any of my stuff the best it could be, because it's not. But yeah, so Generations Ultimate would drop on the Switch, right? Pretty certain. Yeah.
That's correct.
And around that time I was just juggling every Monster Hunter game in existence. And it's weird. It's also where I like kind of took a bit of a break too, despite juggling every Monster game. But I wasn't necessarily there wasn't necessarily any highlights, I think, in my Monster Hunter journey that came out of Generations Ultimate, which is kind of sad to say, but like it wasn't like there wasn't necessarily a turning point. I was just a Monster Hunter fan. I liked
Right.
Monster Hunter. I was playing Monster Hunter. Um,
It's kind of how I felt
I
playing
think
World, I think.
the big turning point for me was the announcement of World. When they showed the trailer for World, I was like, I need to make a YouTube channel. Like I need to get my YouTube channel out. Like I knew I needed to make a YouTube channel, but like World was like, okay, I know about Monster Hunter. There's going to be a ton of new Monster Hunter fans. I need to do something. And I was talking to a friend, like the friend who had played, who played with the other, not the very first person who started Monster Hunter, but the friend who was a friend of the person who got me into it. I asked them if they wanted to start a YouTube channel with me because of Monster Hunter World. We both played the demo. Again, we had talked a lot about starting a YouTube channel, and the reason my channel is called MH United, and I don't think I've ever made an official video on this. The original plan was for it to be run by multiple people. It wasn't just supposed to be me. It eventually became just me.
Yeah.
But the goal was it was an intersection of a lot of different ideas. One of them was it was going to be a gathering of a bunch of Monster Hunters. It was going to have I think there were 5 different series planned. We originally planned on doing a podcast. I think we were going to title it like Hunters Divided or something like that. Where we'd do what we're doing kind of here now, talking about like
Right.
different parts of our Monster Hunter journeys.
Except for worse, because it wouldn't be this podcast.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been as cool,
right.
for sure.
Totally not biased.
And then I was going to talk about a bunch like different history videos and that sort of stuff, and like talk about the way that things had changed and evolved. And there are a lot of content creators who've done that now. Like there are a lot of channels that have history videos, but that wasn't really a thing before World. There really weren't any. There wasn't really any sort of showcase for what the old games had to offer and how it slowly progressed. And all of the history videos that are out do present narratives that are different than I think than the narratives that I'd put on history videos. And it's not to say that I'm not going to do more comparisons. Like I have other things and other history videos planned, but that was like the big point of the channel, was to cover Monster Hunter's history for the people who were starting in World, and to do tutorials for Monster Hunter World. I didn't end up doing any of those things because my life has been incredibly busy, but also not busy. But around that time, around the time of the announcement for Monster Hunter World, there was another major thing that happened, not just my YouTube channel. I had reached out to... I was looking at old forums because the history videos were going to require experiencing the online hubs. And obviously we didn't have online hubs. It just wasn't a thing that happened. I remember being upset. Like at this point, I was like, I really like Locklack. I really want to experience Mindguard. And we have barely any information, especially in English on Dundorma, excluding 4 Ultimate's version of it. And so I remember like spending several months looking through old forum posts, trying to figure out if anyone had made any progress on an online server, or whether or not there'd be any way for me to learn coding and to do it myself, which it's a pipe dream, but that was never going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's when I stumbled into the Resident Evil Outbreak server, and I talked to one of the admins there, and I said, hey, I found an old forum post where you had mentioned that you managed to not only experience Monster Hunter 1,
so that would have been the
you
fog,
managed...
right?
Yeah, it would have been Fog. You managed to experience Monster Hunter 2. Like they said that they were able to go to the hub but weren't able to post quests. And I was like, I need any information I can get about Monster Hunter 2 at this point. Because I was like, I don't have anything and I need to make history videos. Because I'm trying to, like, at one point, one of my goals was like, I want to document everything that's been changed about Monster Hunter. I have notes, a ton of notes on things that have changed about Monster Hunter. They're all scattered throughout my computer, and there's no coherency to them. Like, there's no formal script.
Yeah, they're part of the text files that you docs at the start.
Yeah, they're part of the giant backlog of things. But I was like, I really, like, at that point, it was an absolute drive. And then they're like, yeah, we were able to do it. And apparently they had also been reached out to by, what's his name? I'm trying to remember. I feel bad that I don't remember. They'd been reached out to by, there's another admin in the old school Discord.
Dixtros? Is it Vic?
Not Dixtros. Yes.
Vic? Vicious
I think
Shadow?
I think it was Vic.
It was
Vicious Shadow.
Vic was
because he did. I remember recognizing his name because he did some of the backing up of Monster Hunter Freedom's events, like the download events. Because obviously I could download them off the PSP, but I knew that if the PlayStation Portable things were down, like one of my big fears was like, hey, we're gonna lose all these events, and obviously you can only download a certain number of them at a time. Like, I think it's only like 3 or 4 or something like that of the events that you could download. I'm like, we're going to lose a ton of stuff. And there is a way to get the portable events now because of Vic. I'm like, wow, apparently they had been reached out to already and that they were going to start, or they were going to potentially look into doing a server. Like the wording they used was potentially. And, they did actually end up making a Discord server fairly quickly afterwards. I think it was like 2 weeks afterwards. And I hadn't noticed because like I was checking it every day for like a week. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe it's never going to happen. I stopped checking. And then they made it and replied to me and saying, hey, there's a Discord, you should join. And it took me like 2 weeks after they made the Discord to be like, oh my god, there's a Discord link. And then I joined, and this was obviously they did all the beta testing for Monster Hunter 1. I was an idiot, and my JP copy of Monster Hunter 1. So I had the US version of Monster Hunter 1, which was one of the JP games I didn't import, specifically Monster Hunter 1. Because I already had the US version. Why would I get the JP version? And then they're like, it only works with the JP version. You don't know I have to get the JP version. So I ordered it off of like eBay or Amazon. I don't remember which. But I ordered one. And it took it was going to take like an entire month or 2 to get to us. Because I ordered one for my friend too, who also joined. And I'm like, this shipping is so slow. So by the time I got my copy, they were done beta testing. So I missed out on the entire beta phase, which is a big disappointment. And then World also dropped around the same time. I was also trying to get content done for World, and I never got necessarily everything together in the way that I wanted to when I had planned out the channel before World's release. And then what is it called? I don't remember when I became obsessed with Dose. It must have been between Monster Hunter World and Iceborne, or just after Iceborne's release, where I was like, okay, well, I need to learn more about Monster Hunter's history, and the game that nobody has any documentation on is Dose in English. And there's a certain point where I was like, I just need to commit myself to being that person who puts a ton of notes together in English for Dose. And again, my notes have been used. I didn't necessarily make a video talking about everything that I that I documented, although there's a big video going over a good chunk of it. It was interesting to me to see that there were at certain points throughout Monster Hunter's history where different people like tried translating the game, different people tried documenting it. It's not to say that I was like as necessarily the first pioneer in DOS, because there were certainly people who, like, again, I'd played DOS earlier. I knew about Barango, who had done work on a very interesting English patch, but like it was the only English resource we had for DOS at the time, or one of the only English pieces of resource or English resources we had. It was really cool playing a game that was so similar to Freedom Unite. But so different at the same time. And that's why I just don't understand the sentiment of people who play DOS, who like Freedom Unite, and who are like, oh, just play Freedom Unite instead. Like, I think... personally, for me, it's like, hey, here's a game I enjoy, but different. Like, that's super cool. That's exactly what I wanted, like, the expansion originally for Monster Hunter Freedom Unite to do. Like, it was doing everything I wanted the expansion to do, and I was like, wow, this explores the world in really interesting ways. I get to explore new parts of the tower. I get to discover the tower in a completely different way. I get to, play DOS, basically.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, it felt like this game was somehow fulfilling all of these wishes that I had wished for like the longest time. And obviously I could have played DOS in more detail, but having gotten stuck at Plesioth, like, it didn't leave as big of an impression on me the first time around. But like, if you beat the offline village, you get it. And around that time is when Gigaproto released the offline version of the town. It was cool to learn as much as I possibly could about everything to do with online without actually being online. It was also cool to learn that there was a lot more footage of DOS on the Japanese side of things than I realized, because I had friends who spoke Japanese and they helped me navigate a bunch of the Japanese sites. It was this weird, like, surreal... it's hard to describe the last couple of years. It's been this really bizarre adventure of discovering something really, really old and finding it, like, somehow meets all of these checkboxes that I really like in a Monster Hunter game.
Yeah, it's also got to be weird because it's like,
and
so similar.
It's not to say that like Sunbreak and Rise and Iceborne weren't like fun times, because I had great times with friends, and it was it's a very accessible game, so it got a lot of my friends who hadn't played Monster Hunter, or we couldn't convince to play Monster Hunter, to try Monster Hunter, and to get the appeal of it.
Discord isn't detecting my mic properly.
I think the big highlight for me, obviously, is...
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So my headphones ran out of battery while you're talking, right? Because we've been talking for so long. Good. And I plugged in my headphones, and I was like, okay, perfect. It works fine because it, like, I could hear you, and so I missed like almost nothing. But then I was talking, and my audio input, like everything I said, it was captured by OBS, but like you weren't reacting to it, and I was super confused. And then I realized when I plugged in my headphones, Discord changed my audio device to my headphones, but not OBS. So it was trying to detect a mic in my headphones that I don't have plugged in. But anyways,
not gonna lie, I was worried about my headphones having issues during this thing, because when we started this, it said battery level medium, and they've held up so far. But
yeah.
Anyways, but then good. We met obviously in the translation patch.
Yeah, and
And
I already knew who you were. I still think it's funny that I had watched one of your videos. I think it was your video giving a tour of Dundorma, and I thought it was the
yeah, I had
coolest
no
thing
idea
ever.
who you were. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. No, well, I wasn't. I don't even. I wasn't that big at that time, so it would have been weird if you knew who I was. But I commented, and this is when I was still obsessed with Try, right? But you know, it was like around when I was obsessed with Try, but curious about Dose, and so I had watched your video touring Dundorma, and I commented, and I was like,
Yeah, I do remember. Yeah, I do
yeah,
remember your
yeah.
comment.
I was like,
I didn't
oh, this is
recognize
super
that
cool,
was you
but
when
do
we
it
were
for
talking.
Loc instead. It was just, I
At
think
some
it's really
point,
funny.
I might. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, and I again, speaking of like defining experiences, I think the Break Arts translation of Dose, like, there's so many things where I was like, oh man, I really wish this would happen in Monster Hunter, and like those things have happened where it's like, oh, I wish I could play online on PSP, and all of a sudden I can play online on a PSP. Oh, I wish I could
play Dose in
see
English.
Monster Hunter 2's online mode, or like and Monster Hunter 1 and Monster Hunter G, and all of a sudden that's a thing.
Yeah.
And playing Dose with a proper English patch, and all of a sudden I'm getting invited to help out with that, and it's just been, I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it's been like the craziest last couple of years, like half decade. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it's also it's also been eye-opening for me, because where I used to probably get into arguments with other people in the Monster Hunter community about where Monster Hunter should go and like which game is better. Like for me, I don't think anyone's gonna have my experience. They're just
Right.
not. And I don't necessarily need to convince them that my experience was cool. So I'm not as I guess gung ho about how other people feel about the game. Not as caught up in that drama
Right.
as I used to be.
Do you have much more you feel like you want to say about your story?
I mean, I feel like I touched on most of the major points at the very least.
Alright.
And then yeah, I think that's been my journey.
Well, yeah, my music has just decided to stop working for some reason, so I feel like
That's unfortunate.
yeah, and we talked for quite a while, a lot longer than I thought I would for just point number
That's
one.
what I was
on our
saying. I
thing.
told you.
Yeah, oh yeah, 100%. And yeah, I don't know why I doubted you, but I think what we'll do is we'll quickly go over number 2 on my list, which is our top 3 Monster Hunter games, and then we'll call it there. So what if you had to pick, what do you think your top 3 Monster Hunter games would be?
So I think it'd be impossible to get me to decide between Freedom Unite and Dose for number 1. So it might be cheating. But like if you want to reserve them both for the number 1 slot, or say number 1 and 2,
We'll
like,
go 1 and
it's
2.
It's one of those. Yeah, it's one of those 2 games. And then yeah, it's kind of hard to say from there, because it's
Here, wait, hold on a second. My OBS isn't picking you up.
yeah, you're fine.
This is weird. I'll have to go over it, and you said you have a recording of this, right?
Yeah, I've got 2.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll just have you go, and then I'll probably have to take a look at your recording for the ending. But
I've got 2 separate ones. It will be fun.
cool.
Yeah, it'd be impossible to choose between Freedom Unite and Dose. And then the game that probably follows, like, I wish I could say it was Freedom 2. So I could just be like, I'm that second gen obsessed guy. It's probably Try. Which is weird to say. But Try...
Oh, there we go. I got it recording you now. Sorry.
Yeah, Try I'm probably nostalgic enough about. And that's probably purely on nostalgia that I'd say Try is my third. Either that or World and Iceborne, and it's one of those 2. because I had a lot of fun times with friends, not necessarily for anything in the game itself, but just purely because I got people who wouldn't have otherwise played Monster Hunter into Monster Hunter. It was neat to see them slowly go through their Monster Hunter journeys when I thought they might not, you know.
Right.
What about you? What are your top three Monster Hunter games?
Number one is for sure Dose.
Yeah,
I Number two probably have to be 1JP.
yeah.
And I've been this entire conversation have been basically juggling
Trying to figure out
what
what your
number
third
three would
is.
be.
Yeah.
I'm debating between Try and Sunbreak. I think it and there was a while where I thought maybe it'd be Portable, but I really just think that's recency bias just because I've been playing it recently and having a good time. I think I'd you know what, I'm gonna go with Sunbreak just to keep it a bit more
Varied.
yeah, you know, like I would
Yeah,
say
yeah.
Rise specifically, just because it came out at like such a perfect time for me. Where like one thing I didn't mention is that like I was going through like a really bad breakup around that time, and like just not being in college in a different state, didn't have very many friends. Like it was Rise was one of those things where it just came out at like a perfect
It
time
was
for
that
me.
nice
Yeah,
piece of escapism.
and having that game and the community was just so nice to me at that time, starting to get into Monster Hunter as a community instead of just as a game. And like in that sense, I think I might say Rise, but when we look at just the games themselves, it would Sunbreak is definitely my preferred to the two. But I think I'll go with Rise just because of everything that happened to me with that game and just kind of my experience with that. But yeah.
That's fair.
So yeah, this has been the Kokotocast episode 1. No
Yeah, thanks for
clue
joining.
how many episodes we'll record or how often, but basically whenever we feel like it, we might try to get some guests on, especially if there's any kind of like big news. One thing I wanted to talk a little bit about Wilds. We don't really have the time for that anymore because we keep on yapping, but I'm not complaining. It's been a lot of fun, and I
Yeah, it was a
appreciate
pleasure.
you coming on with me and recording this. And we'll see you guys next time.